I Want to Be Human is another entry in the super hard and super bloody platformer subgenre, occupied by games such as Super Meat Boy and the Dishwater Samurai series. Yet, unlike in my prior examples, nothing here feels fully formed, making the package as a whole appear like the rough draft of a more fine-tuned and expansive idea. What starts out as a simplistic, albeit mildly entertaining platformer, soon becomes demanding of near perfection on the part of the player. I'd say it's in the same ballpark as the aforementioned Super Meat Boy, and that the later stages initially feel like an insurmountable task, one that can only be overcome through a dozen or so trial runs. It's a fairly rough ride that requires a good deal of perseverance and a penchant for pain. I Want to Be Human is, from what I can gather from the poorly explained and paced narrative, a fairly simple revenge tale. Evil corporations experimenting on people, a boy and his girlfriend get caught up in the chaos, and somewhere along the line the boy is turned into a hat. This approach to random so-called outrageous story points can feel contrived and more than a little irritating from time to time. Even if the intention was for the story to come off as something that a forcefully edgy teenager wrote, it still feels like a 30-year-old man's interpretation of what that might be. Honestly, the storytelling and characters may well be the weakest element of the entire game. However, in a platformer controls are king. Unfortunately, I Want to Be Human's imprecise jumping and occasionally awkward aiming makes it somewhat undeserving of the effort and patience that it demands from its players. Bosses are mostly good fun, and the best among them certainly serve as a high point for the entire package. My only complaint here would be that there aren't all that many of them. One of the strangest omissions, however, is the lack of upgrades for the player character. Given that there are a healthy amount of missions, this certainly would have aided progression and kept me wanting to play for longer. The game's attempts at comedy, whilst admittedly not to my taste, felt spotty when compared to other titles that have tried a similar approach to making you laugh. As I progressed, the game's sense of humour grew increasingly grating, especially as the player character and enemies repeat the same comedic one-liners over and over again. Its teenage doodle-style aesthetic reminded me of some of Tim Schafer's work, the excellent Dishwater Samurai games and the recently released Drawn to Death. For me, it's not the most visually pleasing of art styles, even at the best of times, but here it looks especially grimy and repetitive, save for the odd challenge room, where an eruption of pulsing neon serves as a nice departure from the abundant greys, blacks and occasional splatters of red that dominate the majority of levels. The game also does a rather poor job of differentiating the foreground from the background, and it is often quite a challenge to guess what you can in fact land on and what your player character will fall right through. This is a serious issue when you consider how far apart some of the level checkpoints are. Nobody wants to be cheated out of 5 minutes of grueling play by an object that should by all rights be solid. I certainly appreciated the game's open approach to allowing players access to levels in any order. Temporarily being able to skip an especially irksome level or two definitely helped to alleviate some of the frustration that comes with repeated failures at the hands of instant death pits and lock-on turrets. More player-conscious ideas such as this would have made my time with the game far more enjoyable. As is though, I Want to Be Human is a slightly below average entry in the platformer genre. It never once reaches the lofty heights of its contemporaries, but there is definitely some fun to be had here, and given its current price in the PlayStation Store, I'd say it might well be worth a look for platformer enthusiasts who don't mind their games having more than a few rough edges. Overall, developer Sinclair Strange shows a good deal of promise as an up-and-coming indie developer, and I Want to Be Human should act as a solid jumping-off point for his future endeavours.